The studio lights blazed down, drenching the set of the Bennett Hour in a golden glow. It was one of the most watched talk shows in America, and tonight the atmosphere crackled with an almost electric anticipation. J.D. Vance, the newly inaugurated vice president, strode onto the stage with the steady confidence of a man who had nothing to fear but everything to prove. Across from him, Zane Bennett, the razor-sharp host known for dismantling his guests, sat poised like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Bennett had promised a fair discussion, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed him. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was a trap. As Vance settled into his chair, the tension in the room thickened. The usual pre-show pleasantries felt forced. Bennett's smile was practiced, but his grip on the cue cards was just a little too tight. Even the production crew seemed to sense something was off. Vance, a former Marine, had spent years reading people. Right now, every instinct screamed that an ambush was imminent. He braced himself. Bennett wasted no time. His first question was wrapped in honey, but the blade beneath it gleamed. "Mr. Vice President," he said smoothly, "let's talk about your rather dramatic transformation from a vocal Trump critic to his second-in-command. Some might call that convenient." Vance didn't flinch. He smiled, his voice steady. "Ethan, that's actually a great place to start. Because this isn't about politics, it's about something bigger. It's about learning, growth." The audience leaned in. That wasn't the defensive answer Bennett had expected. He shifted slightly in his chair. "Growth?" Bennett's tone sharpened. "Is that what we're calling it now? Some might say it looks like pure political ambition." Vance remained unfazed. "Ethan, in America, we have a long-standing tradition. We change our minds when we see new evidence. Years ago, I viewed President Trump through a narrow lens. But then I saw something undeniable. His policies were actually helping the very people I wrote about in my book. That changed everything for me." Everything for... Bennett hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Vance to go on the offensive. "Let me ask you something. Ethan, have you ever changed your mind about something important? Ever looked at the facts and realized you were wrong?" For the first time, Bennett looked caught off guard. His jaw tightened. "We're here to talk about you, Mr. Vice President, not me," he deflected. The exchange turned sharper. Bennett pushed. Vance pushed back, calmly but relentlessly. "Let's talk about your recent remarks at the National Prayer Breakfast," Bennett said, his voice laced with skepticism. "You spoke about divine guidance in government decisions. Isn't that a dangerous mixing of church and state?" The air shifted. The audience tensed. Vance leaned forward, his tone firm but even. "Ethan, our founding fathers weren't afraid of faith. They were afraid of tyranny. Faith wasn't the enemy, it was the foundation of moral leadership." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Bennett glanced at his producer, who was watching intently. Vance's voice took on a more personal note. "When I was a Marine, nobody questioned the chaplain's presence. Nobody complained when we prayed before missions. Because even skeptics understood some things are bigger than politics." Bennett wasn't backing down. "Your loyalty to Trump, some might say, you're nothing more than his puppet." The word cut through the air like a gunshot. A few gasps. The tension thickened. Vance barely blinked. "Ethan, that word tells me more about you than it does about me. In your world, loyalty is something to mock. In mine, it's a virtue. In the Marines, we judge a person's character by their actions, not by what the media says about them. I've seen President Trump's character firsthand, not the caricature you and your colleagues push." The audience erupted in applause. Bennett opened his mouth, but Vance wasn't finished. "You call it being a puppet. I call it recognizing true leadership. And yes, I'm proud to serve alongside President Trump." Bennett leaned in, voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, you're his lapdog now?" Vance's eyes sharpened, but his voice remained measured. "Lapdog? No, Ethan. I'm a man who believes in loyalty, integrity, and standing by those who fight for the American people. If that makes me a lapdog in your eyes, then I wear that label with pride. The crowd exploded. Applause thundered through the studio, drowning out Bennett's next words. But Bennett wasn't done. He took a slow breath, shifting tactics. Fine. Let's talk policy. Your administration has been heavily criticized for its stance on immigration. Many argue that your approach is too harsh. Some would even call it cruel. How do you justify separating families at the border? Vance's jaw tightened slightly. Ethan, let's be honest. Unchecked illegal immigration leads to chaos. It strains our social services, it hurts American workers, and it puts national security at risk. Bennett pounced. So you're saying compassion has no place in immigration policy? Vance exhaled through his nose, his patience thinning. That's a false choice, Ethan. We can have compassion and enforce our laws. My own grandparents came here legally. They worked hard, played by the rules, and built a life. That's the America I believe in, one where the law matters. Bennett's smirk faltered. The audience was no longer fully on his side. Vance leaned forward. Let me ask you something, Ethan. Would you leave your front door unlocked every night? Let strangers walk in, take what they want, and expect no consequences? Bennett hesitated. The metaphor hit home. That's not the same thing he began, but Vance cut him off. It is the same thing. A nation without borders is no nation at all. We welcome legal immigrants, but we also have to protect our own citizens. That's not cruelty. That's common sense. More applause. Louder this time. Bennett shifted in his seat, his frustration barely concealed. The interview stretched on, covering foreign policy, economic recovery, and government's role in American lives. But with each question, Vance stood his ground, never raising his voice, never faltering. Bennett, once the relentless interrogator, now looked like a man searching for a knockout punch he couldn't land. By the time the cameras cut, the studio energy had shifted completely. What began as an attempted takedown had turned into a masterclass in resilience. As the credits rolled, Bennett exhaled, rubbing his temples. Well, Mr. Vice President, you certainly know how to handle yourself. Vance chuckled, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Years of debate team, Marine Corps training, and a little common sense. Bennett extended a hand. I'll give you this. You're not easily rattled. Vance shook it firmly. That's because I stand by what I believe, Ethan. Maybe you should try it sometime. J.D. Vance's performance on the Bennett Hour wasn't just another political interview. It was a defining moment in his career. In an era where politicians often crumble under media pressure, Vance showcased a rare trait: unwavering conviction. He wasn't just defending himself, he was articulating a vision, one of loyalty, integrity, and unapologetic leadership. His ability to remain calm under fire wasn't just about good debating skills, it was about character. He didn't dodge tough questions, he leaned into them. He didn't pander, he confronted. And most importantly, he flipped the script, turning a hostile interrogation into an opportunity to connect with the American people. This wasn't just about scoring political points. It was about proving that conviction matters more than convenience, and that real leadership doesn't bow to the pressure of the moment. It shapes the future. If you enjoyed the story and found it meaningful, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts and the lessons you've learned in the comments below. Your insights could inspire someone